Hey everyone, this is Phoenix. I wanted to make a quick video today to show people how to make a custom container for like their housing mods and stuff without having to use what it seems like has become sort of the standard convention for modders these days, which is people are using activators because somehow I guess they think that's the only way you can use a custom model with your container, and then having that activator open the container for the player. Um, I don't think anyone should ever do that. I think it's a really bad idea. The main reason because it breaks a lot of things. The game has by default a way to actually plug in to activation events. Say if you've ever done the quest where you have to go and collect blood from different races and you have the blood collector in your inventory, like when you activate a corpse, instead of just opening their inventory, it will actually give you that pop-up menu saying, do you want to extract blood? That is done through the perk system, through the entry point to redirect activation, and things like that will completely break if you use activators for your containers. So if someone had a mod that had a cool lockpicking game that when you activate a container that leveled your lockpicking, it wouldn't work. Mods like my assigned storage that rely on activating a container and detecting that it was a container type that you activated will not work, so you can't use them as assigned storage. It just breaks a ton of stuff. And it also, if your container is empty, normally when you have an empty container, it'll show in parentheses empty next to it. Well, if you use an activator, that won't work either. So you can't tell if a container is empty. It breaks a lot of stuff. But what I wanted to show is that it doesn't actually give you any benefit for all the stuff that it breaks. It is only downside and no good side. People think, I guess, that you can't give it a custom model. You can. People think that you can't assign scripts to it unless it's an activator. You can. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this video. It's really super easy. There's really nothing to it. All I have done is just opened up Skyrim ESM with no active file in here, just so I have the base game to work with. And so what you need to start with is the model path to your NIF. Now, something that you need to be aware of is that the path that you're going to need, obviously if you've modded, you know that all of the meshes and textures go in the data folder. Here's your Skyrim installation folder. In the data folder you'll find like meshes, textures, blah 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 blah. That's all the resources for the game mods are in the data folder. And your models are obviously going to go in meshes. But here's the thing that you're going to need to be aware of. The path that you're going to need to your file is only going to need everything after this. See this whole path here to your meshes, to your data folder, to your meshes, and then add one more slash after that. Well, the path that you're going to need for your file for your container in the game is going to be everything after this slash after meshes. So let's say you have it in a subfolder Phoenix and you have a mymodel.nif, and this is what you want to use for your container. Well, what you're going to need for the path then is everything after data slash meshes slash, so that right there. The subfolder, the slash, the name of the file, that's all you're going to need for your path. But let's say you don't have your own model that you made. Let's say you are going to use something from the game. Let's say, and pretty much everything that can be dropped in the world has a model. Keys, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to go down to containers since I'm going to be making a container there anyway. This is the object window, and on the left-hand side you see all the categories. You can collapse and expand them, so you might have to expand world objects to see container. And I've got this filtered. So container, let's just pick something here that's going to be obviously not a normal container. Let's make it a coffin. So I'm going to double click on this coffin here, and you can see every single resource in the game has a model path. So I'm going to go ahead and in the case of something that already exists, I'm just going to copy that model path. You can hold down Control and hit C, or you can right click to copy. And then you go into your notepad or someplace where you can keep this handy, and you can either hit Control V or you can hit Edit Paste. It doesn't really matter, whatever the way you like. But if you're using a model from the game, that's how you get that model. And you can see it's got the subfolder, and there's actually another subfolder under that, and then the name of the NIF file. And then go ahead and cancel or hit the X on the thing that was from the game that you were borrowing the model from, because hitting OK risks editing existing resources. You never want to do that in your mods. So what you want to do now is you want to make your custom container. So all you have to do is make sure you're on the Containers tab, right click anywhere in here and hit New. And what you want to do is you want to give it an editor ID. This just needs to be something unique. So I'm just going to call it my container 1. But the name is what you actually see in the game when you hover over the container. So I'm going to call this one coffin container. So that's going to be what actually shows up. So that's another thing. If people are doing the activator things, think they need to do activate override text to give it a custom name. I don't know how, but they would get that idea. But you just give it a name here that you want to show up as in game, and that's what it'll be. It can be anything you want. Weight is how much stuff you can put in it. If you made this 100, you could only put 100 pounds or whatever the game's units are worth of stuff, and then you wouldn't be able to put any more. I always leave mine at 0, which means you can put as much in it as you want. The rest of this stuff doesn't really matter. Respawns you want to make sure is never checked. And also the cell, your player home that you're putting it in, you want to make sure when you make that cell that is set to never respawn. And the reason is that when the game respawns cells, it respawns containers in cells, and those containers lose everything that's in them, which means if you have any of your stuff stored in them, it's deleted forever. So just make sure that respawns is never checked. You can give it an open and close sound if you want. Just click on this and you'll see a list of predefined sounds. Those are from up here under audio, under sound markers. That's what you see in this list here. Now these things in sound markers are just references to actually things from this list, sound descriptors, and that is every sound in the game. Not everything in this list is actually given a sound marker yet. So what you can do is, in sound descriptors, you can double click on any of these and play them and listen to what they actually sound like. And if you find one that you like for your open and close sound here, and you go into sound markers and it doesn't exist yet, you just can right click in new, give it a unique name, and then this list will let you choose a sound descriptor and you can make your own. And then when you go into your container and you click on the open or close sound, you'll see your name. It will be in this list somewhere. That's just if you want to give it an open and close sound. You can drag items into it or leveled items into it to be there by default. I usually don't for storage containers because it's just kind of annoying because you have to take it out and put it somewhere else anyway, so I just usually leave that empty. But the most important thing is this model path here. And what you want to do, I'm actually not going to use my model. I'm going to use the one that I copied from the coffin because then it'll be really obvious when we go in the game. You want to copy that path. And then I think people have problems because they right click in here and it's like, well, I can't paste it. It must not be able to use custom models for containers, but you can. You just have to hit edit, and then you have to hit edit again. And then what it's going to do is it's going to open up to meshes, which is why you only need everything after meshes and slash. And all you have to do is just paste that path that you copied right in here. And with the slashes, with the .NIF, everything, just paste it right in there and hit open. Don't open any subfolders or anything, just paste it and hit open. You'll see the file show up here, and you can hit OK, and that's it. You've now given it that custom model, you've given it your custom name, and then you can hit OK. So now what you want to do is you need to put it in your house mod, so you want to go back down to container and find that container you just made. So here it is here, and you need to put it in the, see, everything you see in the editor here are what's called base objects, and you see where it says count, some 85 for this, 41 for this. These are the number of these base objects that have actually been dragged somewhere into the game, and those things that are dragged into the game are what's called references to this base object. All the properties of this base object, but in the game. And you can drag it into the game as many times as you want. They're all going to use the same model. They're all going to inherit the same properties, the same items if you put items in it. So what we need to do is we need to open up, let's just open up Anis's cabin because I don't actually have a housing mod that I'm working on right now. But we'll just put our container into Anis's cabin. So here, pretend this is the housing mod that you want to put your container in. What you would do is you would find the container that you had made, you would drag it into the housing mod, and then you would need to position it, of course, which is kind of a pain, but whatever. You can rotate around holding down shift and moving your mouse. If you hold down like Z and drag it, it'll move it along the Z axis. Something that a lot of people also don't seem to know is if you click on the cell that you put it in, it will actually show up in this list of things in the cell. So what you can do is you can find it in the list, right click it and edit it, and that will be the same as double clicking on it. You can actually edit its properties right from there. So now I can like move it around from here. As you can see, it's moving that around. I can let's drop it down to the ground here. I can rotate it if I wanted. I mean, it just makes things a little bit easier, but it doesn't really matter for the tutorial. The only thing that really is important here is under ownership. For player housing storage, you probably want to make NPC player so that the player owns it. If this is for an NPC, you can put them there. I believe if an NPC, if the container is put in the same cell as them and they own the container, I think they will use it when you, if they're a vendor and they sell stuff, when they go to sell stuff to you, I think. But regardless, you want to make the player the owner for housing mods, and you could go into lock and make it locked by default and set a lock level. You could even make and give it a custom key if you want. That's a whole different thing, not really related to this. None of this stuff is really related to custom containers. Enable parent would be like if you didn't want this to be enabled until something else had been enabled, you could give it an enable parent, and then when that thing was enabled, this would show up. Again, not really relevant. But here, again, if you think that you can only put a script on a container or on an activator, and that's why you're using activators, you can actually put a script right on this, or right on the base object even is better, because then every instance gets the script. So you can actually put scripts on containers and just give them an on activate script, or register them for updates, give them an on update script. You can put scripts on containers, so it's not a problem. Main thing though is make sure the player is the owner. The only other thing to mention is reference editor ID. This is only needed if you want to have a different script not attached to this or its base object be able to reference this instance or this reference that you've dragged into the game here. So like this coffin container in Anis's cabin. If you did want like a quest script or whatever to be able to access it, all you would have to do is make it persistent by giving it a custom name here. And usually my convention for that is just to make it the name of the editor ID and then just add a capital R at the end, meaning it's a reference. And if you have several references to this, you could just number them R01, R02, etc., etc. But it could be anything, it doesn't matter. All you have to do is just give it a name, and the reason is because when you go to your script, like your quest script that you want to be able to access it, you have to define an object reference property. This is an array. If you were just doing it for one object, you wouldn't need the brackets, but you would do object reference property, and then it would be this name, mycontainer01r, because you can't reference base objects in a script. Well, you can, but you can only use them as base objects. But if you actually want to be able to access things, their inventory and stuff like that, and use them in a script, you would have to make it to the reference. So you would object reference property, the name of the reference that you made persistent, and then you could go into the properties of your script in the editor and link it up, and you'd be able to access that. Again, not really important unless you're doing scripting and you want to access this from a different script. But all you have to really do is just move it around in the place you want it to be, make the player the owner, and that's pretty much it. So now your custom container is in the game with a custom model, with a custom name, and all you have to do is just save your housing mod. I'm just going to call this test mod because I'm not really making a housing mod right now. And that's it. So we've saved it. I'm going to close the editor, close Notepad, don't need any of that. Make sure in whatever mod manager you use that you do have the mod checked, so that when you load the game it's actually loaded. And then just load up Skyrim, and then we can test it out. Okay, and then once you've loaded the game, what you can do is you can go into the console and type help, and you can use quotes if there's a space in the thing you're looking for, but I'm just going to type Anis, I think that's how you spell it, and then basically I'm looking for cells, and there it is. It's the Anis's cabin is the one that I actually made the change to. So then I could use that, and I could say center on cell, Anis's cabin 01, caps don't matter in this context. And then that will take you to that place, and then we'll be able to see our container. The reason it's saying steal from is because the player doesn't own this cell. So if you notice, like anything else in here is going to say steal from too, because it inherits this stuff. This is actually Anis's cell, so technically taking stuff from an NPC's house is stealing. So that's why all this stuff says steal. But there's the container. As you can see, we can go ahead and open it up. It's got the name that we wanted. It's got the model that we wanted. Um, it doesn't have any animations built into that model, but that doesn't really matter. The whole point was, how do we assign a container to use things like this lamp as a model or this coffin as a model? I'm guessing that that basket of flowers that you wanted your container to be assigned to doesn't like jiggle the flowers. But if you wanted to make an animation, that's great. That's way beyond the scope. I don't know how to do the flash tags and all that crap to make that work, but there are people who can, so maybe you could find someone to do that. But if basically this was a tutorial about how to make a container use a custom model without having to use activators, which is really a bad practice and makes your mod not compatible with lots of stuff that is actually like it needs really to not be making it incompatible with that stuff. If a perk mod had something where when you access a container you had an option to do something like a lockpicking game or whatever, it's going to basically make anything that adds extra things like menus, like when you click on a container and you get an extra menu, kind of like when you click on an NPC and you have the blood collector, if you've done that quest, and you get that extra menu saying do you want to extract their blood, you would not get that. It would break that because activators bypass the container, which is what those perks rely on detecting. So you really want to use custom models on actual container objects, and so that is how you do it. And that is basically now going to work just like any other container. I can put whatever I want in it, and it's going to have it in there. And even though it says now, actually, I don't know how that works as far as the inheritance from a cell. Since it's inheriting the steel state from this cell not being the player's, I think if you put stuff in here, it might mark it as stolen. Let's go ahead and take this. You know what? It won't, and the reason why it won't is because when you put it in there, it was already in your inventory. So if you put stuff into it that is not stolen and then take it back out, it's still going to be not stolen. So that's fine. But anyway, that is how you make custom containers with custom models without using activators and breaking compatibility. So I hope that this is helpful for somebody.